Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I hope everybody is doing well. Now that we have actually seen the customer segmentation and customer-driven marketing, in the last lecture we actually saw that how can we actually analyze the market using the four different quadrants, which were actually the SWOT analysis. So over here we actually saw in the last lecture we saw the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities and the threats that we can actually use to see the internal and the external of whatever business what we are running. So we can actually see our strengths as well as our weaknesses, and we can also see and study the opportunities that we have in the market and the threats that reside in the forms of our competitors, right? Other than this analysis that we actually do with the SWOT analysis, what we need to understand specifically is that what are the internal and the external factors that we actually have. So there are two different types of factors. One is known as a micro environment, and another one is known as a macro environment. So the market environment actually consists of two different types of elements. One is a micro environment and another one is a macro environment. So the micro environment, the individuals or the key elements which are there in micro environments are actually known as the actors, and the elements which are actually present in the macro environment are actually known as the forces, right? So these actors we actually can consider as the internals, or the key elements which are actually playing the role internally or directly within certain environment. They're the key elements of the environment which are actually interacting with each other, which are directly or indirectly, right? Which are based upon those interactions, they actually have a certain outcome or the reaction, and these individuals are, or the elements are actually residing within one of the systems, right? Whereas the forces are actually something external which is actually being applied to those certain actors, right? So these are the two sort of these are the two major different micro and macro environments. What we are going to do in this lecture is to actually see that what are the different micro environments and the macro environments, and how these micro and macro environments can actually play an important role in the market, and why should we actually analyze these micro environments and macro environments to make a certain marketing decision that we about our product or a service, right? So what we need to actually see is that one sort of an analysis that we used to do was through the SWOT analysis, but we are going to see in the micro environment and the macro environment is that by studying micro and macro environments, we can actually further analyze the strengths and the weaknesses about the actors and the forces, and through these strengths and weaknesses of the actors, or maybe the forces which are being applied, we can actually see the different opportunities and the markets, right? So now when we talk about the micro environment, there are different types of micro environments. One is the company, then there is a supplier, then there is a market intermediaries, then there is a competitor, then there is Publix, and then there is a customer. Now, when we actually talk about the company, we specifically see the structure. I'm not trying to explain the structure of the company over here, but this is actually what happens, right? There is a certain hierarchy of any of the company, or if you're running a business, there is a certain hierarchy in any of the large organizations. What actually happens is that every company has actually a certain operations department, then the research and development department, then there is a finance department, then there is a procurement department, then there is a marketing department. Under this marketing department, what we can see is that there are business intelligence department and the sales support and the customer support. They're all actually linked with each other. All these departments, they all are actually linked with each other, and they actually provide the information to the top management, and the top management actually look downwards to these departments for any of the information which actually they can provide to the top management, and through that information, top management can actually develop a certain strategic decision. So that is why, if you see, these arrows are actually bidirectional. All of these arrows are bidirectional. Just these three arrows, they are unidirectional. And why are they unidirectional? Because marketing department is such an essential department that this marketing department actually collects the information from business intelligence, from the members who actually are in the sales support, the people in the customer support, and from the information which is directly coming from the market, the marketing management coordinate all the activities with the operations department, research and development, finance, procurement department, and all these departments along with the marketing department, they actually provide a certain sort of a strategy, or multiple strategies which may actually give or lead the company to a certain competitive advantage. So therefore, the company in itself has multiple departments which actually, along with the top management, the vision of the top management, they can actually lead to a certain direction. Now, having said that, the individuals working in each of these departments are actually the members of the organizations. So, as such, the company in itself is, and the members working in the company are all the actors which may actually lead to certain analysis of the market, and these actors may actually get information either from their own competitors, see what the competitors are doing, that we'll see just a few slides down the line. They might see what their customers actually require, what sort of the queries actually come to the sales support staff, what sort of the queries actually come to the customer support staff, and the business intelligence, which is actually the direct information from the customers, and based upon that, all the decisions are actually made. Now, let's move onwards. All right. The second one is suppliers. Now, the suppliers actually seem to be, an external part of the company, and they don't, they don't seem to reside in the same circle. But most of the companies actually deal with the suppliers as their partners. Suppliers usually supply most of the raw material to the companies. So because these suppliers play a very essential role in the development of any of the product, or in producing the product in time, so that is why the suppliers are actually given so much importance. If the suppliers do not supply the raw material, they may cause the delay. They actually may cause the labor strikes, they may lead to the external influences raising the production, or the cost of the production. For example, if the suppliers are not supplying the raw material at the cost which is desirable for the company, obviously the cost of production is going to go high. And we already discussed this thing before as well, that if you're getting the raw material expensive, that is going to go into your cash flows, right? So if it is going to go into your cash flows, the margin or profit is actually going to reduce, right? So you have to actually consider your suppliers as one of the essential part of your team, because these suppliers may actually delay the production. They may provide the low quality, because if they're providing you the low quality of the raw material, then obviously the end product that you're going to make is of a low quality, which may actually lead towards lead to the unsatisfied customers or the consumers. So that is the reason why the suppliers play such an important role in as an actor within a micro environment, right? Okay. So what you need to actually identify is that the suppliers which may be so the suppliers which may be actually good for you, who can actually supply you the material in time at the cost that has been actually decided by you and without any delay, right? So these are the few very important things. Then then comes a market intermediaries, right? So the market intermediaries actually help the company to sell, promote and distribute its products to the customers. Now, which company would actually like to sell, promote and distribute your product to the customers, right? So there is no fixed answer. I mean, it sounds very confusing, that why would anyone like to actually sell my product? But there are some companies who actually becomes the intermediaries, who like to actually sell because they have their own profit in it, right? For example, the resellers, right? And the retailers, in which you can actually see the retailers and the wholesalers. So they are not actually producing anything directly, and they are not actually selling what they are producing, because they're not producing anything. So what they're doing is they're actually getting your product and they're putting that on their own shelves and they're just selling them off, right? So that is basically the retailers and your wholesalers. So the company actually sell the product to them and they sell it to the customer. So they are actually the intermediaries, right? Then there is a physical distribution firms, which is actually moving the company stocks to move from one place to another place. I mean, we usually call them the distributors, right? Then the marketing services agencies. These are the research firms and the advertising agencies, and then financial intermediaries like banks and insurance companies. So these are the major intermediaries, the types of intermediaries. Now, if you see over here, we actually see a Coca-Cola with McDonald's, right? So over here, what Coca-Cola is doing is actually promoting themselves. These are actually promoting themselves based upon using the channel of McDonald's, right? So this is actually what is happening over here. Then next is the competitors. Now it is very essential to actually have a look at the competitors and analyze the competitors, what competitors are actually offering, because the competitors actually provide the first-hand information, which may actually give you the direct information about your strengths and the weaknesses, or maybe the possible opportunities and the possible threats, right? So the competitors competitors usually tell you where you have to actually differentiate, where you have to provide something which actually is extra and nobody else is actually offering. So that one piece of information may actually become very important in gaining a strategic advantage in the market, and going ahead one step ahead from your competitors, right? Then the next one is actually the Publix. Now the Publix is any group that has an actual or potential interest in organization's ability to achieve its objectives. Now who would like to do that, right? Who would like to actually have so much an interest that that your organization should actually make a certain profit? Because such organizations, they actually have their own margin of profits in them. For example, financial publics. Now the financial publics are the banks. They actually give you the loans. Now because if you're not, if because they are actually giving you the loans, right? So their vested interest would be that your business should actually bloom, so that they can actually get the interest back. Same is the case with the investment analysts, stockholders. They're all investing in your company. They are actually the group of the people who actually want you to flourish, right? Who want that you should actually be be getting the profit. Because if you are getting the profit out of your business, those investment analysts, the stockholders, the banks, they're all getting their piece of share back, right? Same is the case with the media and media publics, the newspapers, magazines, televisions, because they are actually going to advertise you, right? So if they are going to, their interest is that if you are going to make money, you are going to give a certain amount of piece to them for advertising yourself, right? Similarly, the citizen action publics, for example, local publics, which is the local community issues, then the general public attitude and the company image, then the internal, which actually involves the workers in the company. Now, every single actor in these actually have their vested interest in your company, even the worker, right? Even the public attitude and the company image, right? In front of the general public, right? So all these things, they actually have a certain amount of an interest in your company, right? So that these are the group of the people who actually have an interest in your organization, so that you can achieve an objective, and when you will achieve an objective, they will actually achieve a certain objective as well. Moving onwards, the fifth one is the customers. Obviously, I mean, the customers, whatever you're doing over here is actually for the customers, because it's actually the end customers, it is the consumers, it's the customers who are actually going to give you the real money back, right? So it is actually the consumer markets, it's actually the business markets, the government markets, international markets, any sort of a market that you have, any type of a targeted market that you have, they are the ones who are actually going to give you the money back. So what you're going to analyze is internally these actors, that what do these actors expect and what do these actors actually want. So are these actors are these actors in your favor? And you have to actually identify the suppliers, the market intermediaries, the competitors, the public, the customers. You have to analyze everything. The people who are giving you the raw material, you have to analyze whether they are going to actually give you the raw material in time or not, for your timely production. The sort of the companies that that may become the intermediaries for yourself. Might be a possibility you might not like to sell your product or the or maybe service directly, or maybe through a third party. So you need to actually identify those intermediaries. You need to specifically identify the competitors, right? So the next part which is actually the macro environment, actually involves the demographics, economics, natural environment, or maybe natural disasters, if you're talking about, then technological. I mean, these all are the factors which actually these all are the elements which actually are the forces. Now these are the forces, macro environment, which actually have an effect or may have an effect directly or indirectly on micro environment elements given over here, and these are like 6 elements over here. These 4 elements would actually have an effect on these 6 elements, right? So for example, the demographics, when we talk about the demographics, we saw it on a segmentation, that what does a demographic actually mean. So we deal with the age of the people, maybe the income segment of the people, maybe the gender of the people, but categorically when we talk about the demographics, we can actually see the different generations coming in, or the race coming in, like baby boomers, like Generation X, like millennials, right? So these 3 different generations actually have 3 different choices. Similarly, we need to actually see the geographic relocations of these people, because we discussed it earlier that segmentation is not only the one segment that we are choosing, either geographically or demographically. What we can do is actually we can mix and match all the 3 or 4 different types of segmentations, right? So we are taking the demographics within a certain geographic location with a certain perceptual beliefs, or the perceptual segmentation, right? So over here, what we need to actually see is that we need to actually combine, see that which type of the demography exactly is there. It might be any kind of a demography, right? And we need to actually see that if the lifestyles of the people are changing or not, right? So we need to understand completely what actually how actually these demographics are actually changing people, right? Whether the geographic locations are actually changing the choices of the people of buying, or might be a possibility it's actually the changing family lifestyle, right? So you need to actually study this completely. Then there is economics. When we talk about economics, economics environment consists of the economic factors, right? And this actually is pretty straightforward. There are 3 types of economics factors. One is in industrial economies, developing economies, and the substance economies. Now these economies, the industrial economies, are actually these are the booming economies. These are the developing economies just like us. The subsistence economy are the subsistence economies are generally actually one of the economies which actually are below the developing economies, right? So in the industrial economies, the choices would actually the industrial within an industrial economy, you'd find the generally the expense, people are able to actually spend more. Their spending power is more as compared to the developing economies and the subsistence economies, right? So what we need to understand is that within a developing economy might be a possibility. If you're buying a car, an average population might actually buy this, right? And you might agree with me, right? But within the developing economies, there is there are people who actually might go for the Mercedes, but that is not what we are talking about. People do buy that. People do have the Mercedes, but people do have Audis. People do have the BMWs, but that's not what we are talking about. We are talking about an average economy. And what does an average economy want, right? So within the developing economies, and the average buying power is this, right? But within an industrial economies, the average buying power will not be Mehran, right? It is actually going to be maybe Camry, maybe a larger car, then better features than actually Mehran, right? So that is the reason why we need to actually see the economic environment. Then what are the different economic environments? For example, we being a developing country, we have actually seen the amount of the shift and in terms of economy over the period of time, and we have actually seen the Pakistani rupee going up and coming down again. So we might actually see further changes coming onwards. So it all depends upon the economic change within a country that actually define the spending power of and the income distribution of an individual, right? So this is one of the major factors which would actually help you in identifying that whether if your product, if you are making a product within this country and you actually put a price of around 30,000 and you expect an average person to buy that product, it is very natural that most of the people, they might not buy that product, right? Okay. But it totally depends upon what sort of a product is that. So that is something that we need to actually see. The fourth force is actually the natural force. Natural environment involves physical environment and natural resources. And most of the companies, they actually do not want to portray themselves in creating the pollution, right? They actually want to provide a better environment to the people by the tree plantations, right? Like over here in this Timberland shoe ad, can you see this plastic bottle under the shoe? So this actually means that we don't want any plastic bottles, or we are crushing the plastic bottles, right? So that similarly increased emissions. So this natural environment would actually affect the actors, the way the actors behave, right? The way the actors react to the situation. So these natural environments have a direct effect on the behavior of the actors. So if their behavior is going to change, your product is going to change. You may actually not want the sort of a situation in which the actors and the environment go against your business, right? Then there is a technological change, or the technological environment. Now this environment actually gives you the most dramatic force, which actually is changing everything nowadays, right? There are antibiotics, there are robotics, there are the miniaturization of the electronics, your smartphones, your internet, your online shopping. With the invention of this internet, I mean, you're shopping online, you're shopping, you're getting online medicines, online doctors, online education. Now you are actually getting educated online, right? You're getting the online lectures. So this technological change actually is changing the complete the canvas on which you may actually draw later on. So if you are actually choosing something which actually is way older than the changing technology, and you're talking about a very old technology, then I'm really very afraid that you might not be able to compete in the market. The coming technologies, the upcoming technologies may it may actually make the older technologies outdated. So if you're developing already on the outdated technologies and you're not going with the pace, you'll actually you'll probably not going to penetrate or achieve the same amount of the goals. Whereas this technological environment directly affects, and it has an essentially large amount of the effect upon the actors. So in totality, when we actually go back and see that we actually make this one rectangle over here, right? And let's assume that we actually put an environment over here, right? This is your macro. This is your macro. This is an R actually, right? And we put another rectangle over here, and we actually put a system over here, right? So when we talk about these two rectangles over here, the actors are actually coming over here. So you remember when we actually discussed about the technology delivery system. Now these two micro and macro environment, and the elements coming into the micro and the macro environment are actually the actors which actually come within a system over here. And this macro is basically the sort of the forces which actually apply to the actors directly, right? So we actually discussed that technology delivery system a long time back, but at that time we just discussed it a little bit. We didn't go into too much of a detail of what exactly the technology delivery system was. Now that we have seen the micro and the macro environment, we'd be able to actually put this technology delivery system into a better picture, that how can we actually develop a technology delivery system, and how can we actually study the micro and the macro environment and analyze that what actually is going around us, right? How the different actors which may play an important role in your business may be affected by the macro environment, and how the market can actually change over the period of time, and how can you actually adapt to that changing market is more understandable now. And I hope that this whole thing actually makes a sense for you, right? So that was all till now. So if you have any questions, if you have any queries, you may let me know. You can actually comment below the video, or you may actually contact me on the WhatsApp or Facebook, or you can call me anytime. Before we go, take care of yourself and wash your hands very regularly, and don't go out very frequently, only when you very necessarily need it, not just because you're going to meet someone. All right, and apply this social distancing. Thank you very much. See you next time. Allah Hafiz and bye bye.